Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Myra Sack, who's here to share with us her award-winning book, 57 Fridays, Losing Our Daughter, Finding Our Way. So what does it mean to celebrate life in the face of profound loss? And how can that act transform not only grief, but those who witness it? Well, today's guest is here to share with us just that. Myra Sack is the author of the Nautilus award-winning memoir, 57 Fridays, Losing Our Daughter, Finding Our Way, and she's the founder of Emotion Inc., a nonprofit organization created to support community, movement, and ritual to enhance coping and resilience. Myra is a certified compassionate bereavement care provider, holds an MBA in social impact from Boston University, and graduated with a BA from Dartmouth College. Her writings have been featured in the Boston Globe, People, Today, Upworthy, and many more. Myra serves on the board of the Courageous Parents Network and lives in Boston. So welcome to the show, Myra Sack.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Well, what a great honor it is to have you here and to talk about your Nautilus award-winning book. Congratulations, by the way. What a huge deal that is.
Thank you. I'm deeply grateful and just hope it can reach as many people who might benefit.
57 Fridays is such a deeply personal and moving tribute. When did you first feel really called to share your family's story in this way?
The process for starting to write my daughter Javi's story, which ultimately is a story about love and loss, but it's really a story about how we show up for each other in the hardest times and sort of live these lives that all of us live, which are, broken, but can also be so beautiful and full. And we started, when I say we, my husband and I really started writing letters to Javi, our daughter, who would never speak a word, after she was diagnosed, which was December 17th, 2019. She was diagnosed with a fatal neurodegenerative disease, which meant she would never have an opportunity to speak with us. So we needed to figure out how we'd communicate with her, how we would speak to her soul, how we would connect authentically. And that took the form of writing these letters to her, which would start, Dear Beauty, or for Matt, my husband, Dear Peanut. And that was the beginning of our writing journey. And after she died in January of 2021, it became clear that writing would continue to be my portal to her, and that sharing our story was a way to parent her, and was also a way to be of some service, that sharing what is obviously sort of distinct and unique to us in ways that could be universal was ultimately kind of the only thing keeping me in the land of the living, so to speak.
Well, I am so sorry for your loss. No parent should ever have to say goodbye to a child. And it must have been just a really heartbreaking time, and I'm so sorry.
Thank you. That's really beautifully and tragically said. It's the most difficult thing, I think, to say goodbye and to sort of live a life that is so different from the one we imagined, and how to do that is my continued kind of journey, I suppose.
For those that didn't know Javi, can you share a little bit about her and the light she brought into your lives?
As I sit here talking to you, I'm sitting in a room that is kind of full of her essence. She loved lavender. The color lavender, for whatever reason, sort of made her feel comfortable. Her seizures and spasms sort of softened when she was wearing beautiful lavender shirts. She had these gorgeous kind of hazel green eyes. Actually, Matt and I argued when we were filling out her passport application, thinking we'd have a chance to travel with her, about exactly what color were her eyes. And so it was some beautiful mix that's maybe otherworldly, but they were so captivating. She had this giggle that could just stop a room in its tracks. It kind of came from the deepest part of her and bubbled up and just took over. She loved being outside and in nature, and I think maybe most importantly, she pushed us in her own kind of quiet, ferociously graceful way to live this life today in its fullest. And she did that really from the moment she was born. She had this kind of deep wisdom about her that honestly I wish she never had, so she could just be here and she'd be 7 this September. But she was quite a magnetic force.
What a beautiful soul. And such beautiful light that she brought into your family, into your lives. And how was the whole medical process? How did your family deal with that?
So Javi's diagnosis was actually a result of a medical error that was made in our genetic testing that happened pre-conception, meaning before Javi was even conceived. My husband Matt and I both pursued genetic testing because we are both Ashkenazi Jewish, which meant we were at greater risk of carrying some of these fatal neurodegenerative diseases. And unfortunately and tragically, Javi was born without us realizing that Matt was in fact a carrier for Tay-Sachs disease. And so what that meant was that because we were both carriers, Javi had a 25% chance of carrying the disease as well, of being affected by the disease. And so we spent the first year of her life assuming that everything was fine, that we had done all of the proper genetic testing and that Javi was just developing a little bit slower than her peers, and that we would sort of keep our type A tendencies at bay and let her be who she was. And then at about a year, she started to regress. And so we needed to consult with the medical institutions more explicitly. And we underwent about a 3 or 4 month diagnostic odyssey that ultimately resulted in her diagnosis. And the way we coped with the error and a whole handful of experiences with the medical system that were challenging and disappointing, and then also a whole host of experiences that were beautiful and inspiring, was that we just tried to center sort of every day in listening to, responding to, anchoring to Javi and what she needed, and tried to quiet the noise of sort of the outside world, including the traditional medical system, so that we could allow her to live a life that she wanted, that she was comfortable and peaceful and in the arms of someone who loved her, and not in a hospital with blaring noises and flashing lights that were really challenging for a kid with Tay-Sachs. And so our relationship to the medical system was complicated. Certainly, Matt was a physician scientist. He was an MD, PhD, so he had been inside the system. And in a lot of ways, the system failed us, and that was devastating. And in other ways, we didn't have time to lament that so much because we had such little time with Javi. We'd have about 15 months with her after her diagnosis.
That is a very quick time when you're still trying to navigate what's happening and how to best proceed.
Yeah, it was, it's interesting. In some ways, it was sort of the shortest time of my life and the longest time. In that way, time sort of collapsed on itself, and we entered almost this space that was on a different level, a plane that was on a different level of living. And that was because we had to constantly sort of balance what it was like to live in the mundane and the everyday, and what it was like to try to create sacred spaces and sacred moments so that, 5 years later, I can feel and touch and be with her in a way that is not even close to enough, but that gives me some sense of a real relationship to her. And ultimately, that's what we have.
What are some of the rituals that your family created during this time?
The most profound ritual that we still do today was something that we called birthdays. Birthdays came out of this idea that we couldn't wrap our head or heart around the fact that Javi would only have 2 birthdays on this earth. That just seemed unfathomable and unfair and cruel. And so we were trying to figure out how we could get more, how we could get more for her, which ultimately I think is what we're all trying to do. And so this idea of, okay, well, every Friday we get Shabbat. And if we combine Shabbat with a birthday, could we get more birthdays for Javi on this earth? And so we came up with this name, Birthday, which at the time was this silly name that would mark this moment where we would honor Javi differently than if she were healthy and her life was going to unfold in a long, beautiful way. And so every Friday we had a birthday, which meant that we would gather sometimes just ourselves, most often with her closest people, so our family and some close friends. And we would sing and dance and cry and eat and try to relish in each other's company. We would not pretend the pain away. We would sit in it, and we would also appreciate all the beautiful moments that we know are so fleeting. And we got 57 of those birthdays with Javi on Earth. And still today, nearly 5 years later, we honor birthday every Friday. And so that ritual was really central to how we lived. It was how we moved from one Friday to the next. And when we were experiencing such traumatic loss and such anticipatory grief, that 1 week period felt like the longest time horizon we could possibly endure. So that was our lifeline. And after Javi died, we've created other rituals. I relied on making a blueberry smoothie every morning because that's what we fed Javi pretty much every day of her life once she lost the ability to chew. And so just hearing the blender, seeing the vibrant blue-purple color, and getting to taste what was her smoothie was something that got me out of bed and connected me to her and our lives together. And now we continue to write her name everywhere we possibly can. We often have friends and family place coffee orders in her name so they can hear the barista say it out loud. But really, it's a matter of finding ways to integrate her so that she still exists in this world with us in a day-to-day way, not only in some kind of extraordinary, magical way.
What does the name Javi mean?
Javi means life. It comes from Hebrew, chai, and we found it on a list. It was offered as a nickname for Hava. We felt like Javi was a playful version of that. And her middle name, Lev, means heart. And so her name means life and heart, which I had no appreciation for how sort of tragically beautiful that would be.
It's a beautiful name. It's a
Thank you.
beautiful name. How did you and your husband, Matt, really kind of navigate the emotional aspect of all this? The rituals are just so profound and so heart touching. And I think it gives a lot of people hope that beyond the rituals, how did you guys navigate that emotional pull?
There was a lot of learning about what we were actually feeling, this notion of being self-aware enough to know what we were feeling so that we could figure out what we needed in any given moment. We started doing something where every morning we'd wake up and look at each other and ask the other person, what do you need today to be okay? And a lot of times that just meant maybe taking a 10-minute walk or eating something healthy. But doing that sort of audit came first from a place of actually accessing the deepest parts of us. Were we in anguish? Were we in envy? Were we in yearning? And sort of being really granular about what we were feeling gave us the tools to express how we needed to exist in that day, in that moment. And so we turned to a lot of reading, spiritual books, mystical books. Grief education became a really important sort of staple in our house, trying to understand from people that we came to trust and respect what did living in grief actually mean for us, and what would it look like to sort of fully inhabit it, so that we could live lives that were big and bold and not, small and scared, I guess. But that process is a difficult one and requires lots of time and attention and energy. And ultimately what it gives you is a sense of self-trust, because there is so much misunderstanding, I think, about what it means to really live with life-disrupting loss, that for grieving people like me, if I don't fully understand what I'm feeling, it could be easy to get kind of knocked off balance by people who say and do things that, might be harmful. So arming ourselves with the kind of psychological Teflon and emotional self-awareness was, I think, probably the most important skill.
I think anytime we lose somebody, there's always well-meaning people that say or do things that, for whatever reason, have a cut. And we know that they don't mean that, but at the same time, it's like, oh, that really hurts, and that's a tough one to deal with. And it has me kind of thinking, so what did grief teach you about love that you didn't know before losing Javi?
That is such a beautiful question. I think it has taught me and is continuing to teach me that depth, really sort of deepening our souls and our way of living, works in both ways, that we have to be able to access kind of the depths of our sorrow and our pain in order to access the sort of heightened sense of beauty and appreciation and joy and love that really comes along with knowing that devastating pain. And so grief has taught me that there is real opportunity to live understanding and appreciating that we have no control. And when we give up that sense of control and lean in instead to faith and hope, not in a, maybe more in a maybe sort of sense, like maybe things can be beautiful and can turn out well, and that we don't have to live in devastation, that we can only really get to that place when we have fully understood what it means to lose. And that's a blessing, and it's also one that I wish I never really knew.
I think that's such a profound statement. It's a club no one wants to be in, but at some point, everyone loses somebody who's so dear to them, and that's just a tough road to walk.
It really is, and it can be isolating, and figuring out how to create social stability and connectedness and community, when a lot of times we can feel like aliens among peers, is a challenge, and is an opportunity to sort of engage in the world and engage with people in ways that are different from being dominated by kind of small talk and superficiality.
During all of this and to today, how has grief continued to show up in your life that maybe has surprised you, and you found also bits of love along the way?
It surprises me all the time when I watch and am with my two living children. Javi has a younger sister, Kaya, and a younger brother, Ezra, and they're almost 5 and 3 respectively. And I think that when they are holding hands, when they're playing, when they're fighting, Javi's presence is so profound that it can sometimes kind of knock me off my feet. And that's because I am witnessing my family unit that is so full and beautiful, and also will forever be incomplete, and how to live with that every day in sort of the micro moments and the major milestones is where, for me, grief is most present. And then it's also present in that component of fear, of how to trust that we have no control. And so what that means is that we can live big and brave. But there are definitely times when the fear-based thoughts of losing again, or something going terribly wrong, creep in, and I need to be aware enough that that story I'm telling myself is directly related to the trauma I lived through with Javi, and that I don't let it take over my life.
What message do you hope bereaved parents take away from your story?
That they are the bravest people I know, and that it's still unfathomable to me that we can put one foot in front of the other, and oftentimes that's enough, and that we should have the honor of being with people who can sit with our grief and our pain and appreciate and integrate our children in a way that they deserve. And so often that doesn't happen for us, and that is a huge missed opportunity to create a culture and a community of people that really honors and respects grieving parents, as opposed to fears and sort of sidelines them.
That's really profound. Thank you for sharing that. How would you define strength now, having lived through this experience?
Strength is about being totally shattered and still seeing the possibility of life as beautiful and generous. And it's about being shattered and also being able to open ourselves up to new love, to new experiences, to, in my case, to new children. And I think strength is also about having the self-awareness to know what is good and right for us, and sort of standing in that space with deep conviction.
Thank you for sharing that. What would you say to someone who doesn't know how to support a grieving parent and they're just looking for a way to be present?
In my experience, the best thing is to just try to come to know the child who died, and to genuinely ask about that person, their name, who they were, what the parent misses, to sort of lean into their loss experience in a way that fully honors what it means for their child to not be here. Because all we really want as parents is for our children to matter, to feel like they belong. And so anyone who's trying to show up for a grieving parent has the opportunity to do that by asking their name, and not being afraid of the tragedy.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us and just really sharing your story. It's such a profound story. And I think it touches so many people because it's you're so heartfelt in the way that you have written this book. It's such a beautiful tribute to Javi.
Thank you, Marianne.
What work are you doing now in the grief space?
I started an organization that's called Emotion, and we combine the power of movement, community, and ritual to offer communities of care, as we call them, for people who are grieving. And those communities of care take different forms, but our kind of primary programming is something called a movement community. And these are communities of people with lived experience that get to move together with their grief. Some communities run, some walk, some hike. And these movement communities now exist across the country in about 23 cities. And it is an attempt to create sort of these near peer communalistic healing models so that grievers feel like they have someone or some people to turn to and move with.
That's such an important piece. Is it because people tend to isolate during their grieving process and they need an outlet?
I think it can be so isolating to be in grief because, as we talked about, there's all these well-intentioned people who really don't know how to carry the loss with us. And so we can isolate because it's just a lot more comfortable actually to isolate than to sort of exist in this world that's grief illiterate. And so trying to kind of build these communities of care is a way for grievers to exist in the everyday world, but surrounded by people who can hold their pain as well because they know the deepest pain too.
What do you hope readers carry with them after turning the final page of 57 Fridays?
That it's possible to live the worst loss and still stay sort of fully in the land of the living if we have people around us who are willing to turn towards us instead of away. And I would love the person reading the last page of 57 Fridays, if there's someone who's trying to show up for a griever, to take some really key lessons away. And if someone themselves is grieving, to just see the sacredness in themselves and to be gentle with the tremendous, extraordinary pain they're carrying.
Where can our listeners and readers connect with you and learn more about your work and be part of your communities?
The best way is we have a website. Emotion has a website. It's www.emotion-mc for movementcommunity.org. I'm also on LinkedIn and a few other social media platforms, just my name, Myra Sack.
Well, Myra, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you so much for having me and for trusting me with your incredible listeners.
Well, thank you, Myra. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your award-winning book, 57 Fridays, Losing Our Daughter, Finding Our Way. 57 Fridays is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And remember, support our indie bookstores. If you don't see it on the shelf, just ask for them to order it. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Mary Ann, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Mary Ann is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Mary Ann will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmaryann.com for more information.